It is shot like a modern movie, but everything else about it is noir. It's LA Confidential, essentially. Thank you for joining me for yet another episode of the Everyman Movie Review. We are staying on theme for the next few episodes, and today we are going to be talking about Ed Norton as Lionel Esrog in the film Motherless Brooklyn. Now, it's really hard to say, hey, something different from Ed Norton than the usual characters that we've seen him as, because Ed has been basically every kind of character in any kind of film. But my first experience with Ed Norton came out of Fight Club, and after that, I guess it would probably be The Hulk. And then if you go into his back catalog and everything since then, he's done a variety of stuff, but I think that this character is so unique, so different as a protagonist, so it's worthwhile to mention in this group of films. And in this film, Lionel is a detective in the 1950s, and he is trying to figure out the murder of his boss, which we see in the first act of the movie. But before we get too far into it, let's get through the pleasantry, shall we? Motherless Brooklyn was written and directed by Ed Norton, and it's based on the novel from Jonathan Lethem. It is starring Ed Norton as Lionel Esrog, Gugu Mbatha-Raw as Laura Rose, Alec Baldwin as Moses Randolph, Willem Dafoe as Paul Randolph, Bruce Willis as Frank Minna, Ethan Suplee as Gilbert Coney, Jerry Jones as Gabby Horowitz, Bobby Cannavale as Tony Vermonte, Dallas Roberts as Danny Phantom, Josh Pace as William Lieberman, Fisher Stevens as Lou, Robert Wisdom as Billy Rose, Michael Kenneth Williams as the Trumpet Man, Leslie Mann as Julia Minna, and Peter Gray Lewis as the mayor. And there are a lot of names on that list that I could have taken as the actor who we know from something way different, and now we're going to see him in this. Ed Norton is the writer, director, and star of the movie, so I went with him, but there is a lot of great performances here in kind of roles that we haven't seen those folks in before. So as we start out with Motherless Brooklyn, we get to meet Lionel. He is a man in the 1950s with Tourette syndrome, and I don't think it's identified as Tourette's, because I don't think it was identified as Tourette's at that point, but he just has a problem, and he always curses and says inappropriate things and has tics, and the only thing that really calms him down is marijuana, which is of course frowned upon, especially with the law enforcement people he's closely in contact with. But we learn that Lionel has some other talents as well. He basically never forgets anything. You could tell him a number, he'll be able to recall it. You could ask him what happened on a day and a time, he'll be able to tell you bit by bit what happened. Like, what happened when I came to the office last Thursday? And you walked in, you put your jacket up, you threw your hat up, you threw something at Gilbert, and then you went into your office. And like, he just knows everything. And I guess I relate to that a little bit because I have that skill as well. Weird memory that just like it makes me able to recall things even though I don't remember remembering them. But if someone was to ask me, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's over there in that box. And it's there. So weird talent. Luckily, I don't have the other parts of the Tourette's with the cursing and stuff. But Bruce Willis is his boss at a detective agency, and this is stylized. It doesn't look like a 1950s film noir kind of look, where black and white and there's weird shadows and it's all dark. It is shot like a modern movie, but everything else about it is noir. It's LA Confidential, essentially. It's a detective agency in the 50s. Joseph Minna leads it, Bruce Willis, and right off the bat, he has a special assignment for Lionel. He goes along with Gilbert, and they're in the car together. They're watching the back of Joe, and Joe gets himself into some trouble, and Joe ends up getting himself killed. And now Lionel has made it his personal vendetta to go out and find who killed him and why. And he suspects that there's something else going on, and he just might be right about that. But Bobby Cannavale as Tony is now the leader of this ragtag group of detectives. We actually come to learn during the movie that these guys met each other at different points in their lives, but they all kind of had that same connection. The connection was being protective of each other, even though they're very different people. And Bruce Willis actually was their leader, a sergeant, captain, something in the military, and they all followed him there. And because of that, they followed him continually after into the real world and joined his business. And like a true detective, not like True Detective, but like a true detective, Lionel follows the clues wherever they lead him. This means that he ends up figuring out that Tony and Julia, Joe's wife, are actually involved and have been for a while, and that Joe got himself into something he wasn't expecting. And it involves public figures, it involves development, and it involves very powerful people. And when all of those things mix with secrets, you're liable to get yourself killed, and Joe went and did that. So I'm going to stop right here. We'll do a quick spoiler section, and then we'll come back for my overall thoughts about the movie as a whole. If you don't want to listen to the spoilers, make sure you skip down to the time down below, but do it now, because spoilers are starting right here. So I realized I had to jump into spoilers early because, again, with the detective story, it's difficult to talk about things without first spoiler warning the whole thing. But, we meet Alec Baldwin as the most powerful man in New York. He's not the mayor. He's the head of all of these other little agencies. And basically everyone is paying tribute to him. He has kind of set up the entire city like it's a mafia organization. And in fact, it's organized with the mafia, and some of the mafia people are paying him tribute as well. And he kind of controls everything in the city, and no one is strong enough or wants to stand up against him. That includes the new incoming mayor, who actually appoints him to the positions that he asks for, and it seems like the only voice of dissent is his brother, played by Willem Dafoe. But the problem is his brother is also kind of crazy and seems a little bit like a street person in many respects. But Lionel dives into this story where he is trying to figure out the murder of his friend, and he realizes that he is being drawn into something way deeper than he ever imagined. It involves jazz clubs in Uptown, and that's where he meets Laura and her father, and they start to fall for each other, but at the same time, it's the 1950s. Lionel has a condition. Laura is a black woman in New York City. This, it's star-crossed lovers, if there have ever been such a thing in film, except for, Romeo and Juliet. And as he digs deeper, he realizes that this relationship with Laura is more involved with his investigation than he knows. He finds out that Laura is the love child of this most powerful man in New York, Alec Baldwin, and that man is also super racist. But despite being super racist, like many super racists, also will have sex with the help. And that's how Laura came about. Her mother was a maid at a hotel, and Alec Baldwin essentially forced himself on her, and she became pregnant. And she didn't really want anything from him. All she wanted was for him to acknowledge the child, and he never did that. But his brother, Willem Dafoe, sent her off to law school, sent her to colleges, made sure she had the best of whatever he could provide, and kind of looked at it as his ace in the hole, that if he ever needed to bring his brother down, because he was even controlled by his brother, that he would have this evidence. And in the end, Lionel needs to make a move. He realizes that Joe unlocked everything and it got him killed, and he needed to figure out how he could unlock everything as well without the same happening. He figures out the story with Laura. He figures out who Willem Dafoe is. He figures out how developers of the city are involved and how it all ties back to one man. And in the end, he gives up all of that power and authority and money he could have had, and he does it just to keep himself and Laura safe. And in that way, it turns into a weird kind of romantic movie that you don't see coming. You think it's a detective story, and it is, and he figures out a bunch of stuff. But in the end, it's not really a detective story because he figures it out when Joe gives him the clues that only he could figure out, given that he remembers everything anyone ever says or does around him. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with friends of mine recently about kind of this very topic. Like, if you knew you had blackmail material, there are a lot of ways that you can use it, but, my thought is always, how would I use it to benefit me? And when suggestions are made by other people about things that they may do, I would continue just to push back with, how does that benefit me? Yes, it embarrasses the person. Yes, society grows and they fall from power and everyone's a little better off, but how does that benefit me? And Lionel, in many respects, took this golden opportunity that he had and he used it to protect a woman that he met recently, but I guess loves, movie rules, and himself, and allowed them to go off and live a full life. But that's just about enough for the spoilers. We're at the end of the movie. That means end of the spoiler section. So let's bring everybody back in, and we're going to wrap up this review right now. So going into Motherless Brooklyn, I had the mindset that this is Ed Norton written, directed, and starring. It's probably one of those things that is pushing for an Oscar or an awards contention anyway. And it may not be the most entertaining thing because I do find that those tend to be super complex and overly so, and less entertaining and more about how does it look and how does it feel and how do the performances. Well, on the top, the performances are amazing. I said kind of at the top of this review that people are playing roles that we haven't really seen them in before. And everybody, Ethan Suplee and Tony Cannavale and Leslie Mann, Bruce Willis. Oh, Bruce kind of plays a guy that we've seen him before. But Ed Norton, all of these actors, they're all playing roles that are very different than what we've seen them in before, and they do an excellent job. I think that it was written really well, and it looks beautiful. But it is a slow burn. But comparing with some detective recently, Ready or Not is kind of a detective story, and Knives Out is kind of a detective story. And I've seen some shows that are, true crime or based on true crime, and there's a detective story mixed and involved. But, this thing it was kind of long. At 144 minutes, you're dedicating more than 2 hours of your life to it, and it feels every minute of that 144 minutes. That being said, it was an interesting story. It had a lot of twists and turns, and when you find out the whole thing, the thread that ties all of these kind of plots that seem unconnected together, you really get a cathartic moment of like, oh man, and I didn't see it coming, caught me by surprise, and it's difficult to do that. So for that, applause to you, Ed Norton, thank you. But I also do get the sense that in some ways, a lot of people would turn it off before they got there because it takes a long time and a circuitous route to get there, and it's not the most interesting story. I think they throw in a lot of Lionel in there to try and make it more interesting, but a guy with tics in a city and a society that doesn't really understand it can only be kind of funny and drag the story for so long. So listen, if you're into like that kind of movie that like going for an award and therefore it's going to be more artistic, it's going to be drawn out, there are emotional moments where it almost feels kind of propped. They are pushing forward to that emotional moment because they want to have that catharsis, and because they're doing that, it's less cathartic than you might like. Then, if you do like that, then this is probably going to be for you. I do enjoy those movies, so I enjoyed it. But even in my enjoyment, I can say, I wish it had been a little shorter. And if detective stories are not for you, if that kind of long drawn out, like slow burn movie is not for you, then Motherless Brooklyn is not for you. There's not a lot of violence. There is some, some violence is inferred. We see somebody punch Lionel in the face. We don't see the punch. We see it from Lionel's perspective, punch coming in. And then we see Joe get shot, but there's not a lot of blood or gore, at least at the shooting. They rush him to the hospital after, and then, blood on shirt, blood on hands, that kind of stuff. But nothing super controversial, nothing super bad. And you need that because, again, if you're pushing for an awards contention. But overall, it's weird. I don't highly recommend this. I don't push people to go see it. I also wouldn't say to avoid it because I did think it was good, but it's only going to be for a certain kind of person. So after watching the review, if you think you're that kind of person, check out Motherless Brooklyn. If you don't, then it's probably going to be okay to skip it. It was a movie from 2019, so it's not going to be in the awards contention this year. So whatever it got, and you probably won't hear from it again after this review. But whether you skip it or whether you watch it, make sure that you're going to make time in your schedule to check out the next episode of Everyman Movie Review. We're doing 2 episodes a week. They'll be out on Thursday and one day in between, so you're not going to want to miss that. If you're looking for something more often than that, I do a daily podcast called Rob Explains. New episodes every single day. You can find it at anchor.fm or wherever you get your podcasts. We're actually going to put those episodes on YouTube as well, where you can have the entire week back-to-back of those 5 to 10 minute episodes and consume them all at once if you prefer to have your content that way. But thank you for joining me for this episode, and I hope we'll see you here next time for the next episode. Until then, please take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great week.